Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today we're going to be taking an early look into patch 9.15 on the PBE server and see exactly what Riot is cooking up for us in the next cycle. So if you end up enjoying this video or finding it useful, then don't forget to hit that like button, but let's not waste any more time and just jump right into it. So I'll be doing this video a little bit differently. First we'll talk about the nerfs, then we'll talk about the buffs. Starting things off for the nerfs is of course going to be Evelynn jungle. Now they're going to be reducing the Q cooldown refund against monsters by 10%. This is supposed to slow down her jungle clear overall by just a little bit, though with that being said, I still generally think that this shouldn't affect Evelynn jungle too much. I mean, yes, it will slow her down, and yes, obviously that's kind of a bad thing for her since she wants to get level 6 as fast as possible for the ultimate, for the invisibility. She should still be fairly viable regardless. Moving along, they're also going to be nerfing Rumble in the mid lane, and they're going to be doing that by reducing the amount of shielding he gets from his W. You can see here the base shielding has run down by 20. Now this isn't surprising because his W does definitely shield for a little bit too much, right? It's very hard to outpoke him because he can clear waves fairly quickly, and his W, it just absorbs way too much damage. So that's going to be nerfed, which I'm not surprised. Again, I faced it not too long ago as Zed. It's pretty much impossible to get through his W, but even with that being said, I still don't think Rumble should take too much of a negative hit this patch because his damage is not touched. Next up on the chopping block, we have some nerfs coming over to Keanu in the mid lane. Now, Keanu, of course, is the newest champion in League of Legends, and even though she's a very hard champion, or people are still kind of learning her, people that have learned her and understand how to play her understand that she is very, very strong. She could do a disgusting amount of damage early to mid game, and that's the part that's going to be nerfed. So first off, we have her ultimate's cooldown being increased by 20, and her E damage is now flashable because the most basic combo is the EQ, right? And that guarantees the Q damage, it guarantees the E damage, but now if you flash properly, you'll still get hit by the Q, which of course is still, I guess, in theory, bad for the person facing Keanu, but at least now, since you can avoid the E damage, you won't take as much damage anymore in the full combo. And the final champion being nerfed is going to be Karma support, and this nerf is actually aimed at professional play, so essentially LCS. The amount of shielding that Karma now offers whenever you use her E ability combined with her ultimate is now overall lowered. The base shielding is lowered and the AP ratio on the shielding is also lowered. Personally, I don't see Karma too much in the support role at the very moment, but again, don't forget, this is specifically aimed at professional play. But let's now move into the champions that are receiving some buffs, and starting things off, we have Lissandra. So you can see here her health is actually being increased overall, and her health per level is also being increased. Not entirely sure what the reasoning behind this is. I mean, I don't really think this is what she needed, nor do I think she actually needs it in the sense of that she's weak. I mean, she's not really the most OP champion, but she's not definitely the weakest champion. She's kind of in the middle, which I don't think is a bad thing. So a little bit confused as to this buff because it's a fairly decent amount of extra health she's getting now. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with it. Next up, we also have a buff coming over to Malphite where his Q slow has been increased across the board by 5%, and his W, the first hit bonus damage, has also been increased by 10 period. So nothing too completely outstanding coming over to Malphite, but he's also a champion that you have to be very careful with because even though he's a very simple champion at the end of the day, if he's too strong, there's really no reason to play any other tanks but him. Next on the buff list, we have Poppy, which is very surprising because now her W movement speed is actually 40% rather than 35%. Not entirely sure why that is. I mean, I personally think Poppy is actually perfectly fine the way she is at the moment after the buffs she has already received this patch. Maybe people haven't caught on just how strong she is, so not really sure why Riot is doing this already, but I mean, she's getting yet another buff, so definitely want to watch out for this champion in the next patch especially. We also have some buffs coming over to our boy Graves, and of course most likely aimed for him in the jungle. Now this is a jungle champion we haven't seen too often recently because I guess people just don't play him. He's just not as strong as many other options, but this might change it around because now his quick draw armor has been overall increased at the earlier ranks, which obviously means that his jungle clear is now going to be much healthier. And if he's dueling other AD junglers, like maybe something like a Khazix or a Kane, especially earlier in the game, well, he's going to be winning those duels much more convincingly now because he gets extra armor. Moving along, we also have a buff coming over to Leeson where the damage on his Q ability is being increased by 5. Now, this isn't a whole lot, but I'm assuming this applies to both parts of his Q. So overall, it is, I guess, technically 10 in increase of damage. Again, Leeson is also one of those champions where if he's too strong in the jungle, I mean, no one will be able to match him. So you have to be very, very careful with how you change this champion around. So this is a very kind of nice, small little buff for Leeson. I think they will definitely notice the difference, but it's not going to completely overbuff him and make him overpowered. But speaking of small buffs, we also have one coming over to Khazix's Q, where his base damage on it has also went up by 10. Similar to Leeson, Khazix is yet another abusive jungle champion where if he's ahead or if he's too strong, he is just simply way too strong. So very careful treading here by Riot Games with Khazix buffs. So hopefully he won't be too strong, because at the moment I honestly think he's actually quite good. So I'm not entirely sure why Riot is buffing him, but apparently they are. Next up, we have a buff coming over to Galia, which is the champion that actually needs it. The buff to him is as follows. His passive cooldown has been changed from being 5 flat to now being 5, but also being affected by CDR, which is a pretty big buff. The damage on that has also been changed from starting at 15 going up to 180 to now going up to 200 instead. And the damage on his E ability has also been increased by 10 at every single rank. Now, is this enough to bring him back to glory where he should be? I don't think so. And the reason for that is because even though they're increasing his damage, which is obviously a good thing, I still think the biggest issue is the fact that he can no longer use a flash W. So I don't know if these damage buffs are going to change a whole lot, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's really not that much more damage. So I don't think this is going to be enough at all. Next up, we have a buff coming over to Swain where the range on his Q went up by 50, which I'm also a little bit surprised about. I actually don't think Swain needs any buffs. I think he's fine the way he is at the very moment. In fact, I actually think he's quite decent. But with this buff to his Q, my goodness, next patch, this is the champion to watch out for. Moving along, a buff is coming over to LeBlanc, where her E ability's damage on the second part of it is being increased by quite a bit in regards to the base damage. Rank 1 is the same, but by the time you get it to rank 5, it's going to be doing an extra 60 damage, which is a lot. Now again, don't forget, this is only for the second part of her E, which I think, I mean, regardless, that's still perfectly fine. If you land this first part of your E, I mean, usually you'll get the second part of your E on that target as well. So this is going to be extremely scary. However, don't forget, LeBlancs usually max their E last, so rank 1 is the same damage, nothing changes, so they probably will start maxing it second instead. Next up, we have a quick buff coming over to Syndra, where her Force of Will Transcendent bonus, which is her W, the 20% true damage plus the extra scaling is now going to be 30% true damage plus a lot extra scaling, as you can see. Now, if this buff actually goes through, I probably will start picking up Syndra in the mid lane myself, because I actually love this champion. I think she's so much fun to play. I think she's just super, super cool, but I don't think she's as strong as she should be or could be. This, however, will make her as strong as she should or could be. So if these buffs go through, definitely playing her. But speaking of a mage that I am currently playing, we have some buffs coming over to Xerath, where the range on his ultimate is now 5,000 at all ranks, rather than starting at 3,200 rank 1 and being 5,600 by rank 3. So a nerf to his rank 3 ultimates, but a buff to his rank 1 and rank 2 ultimate, which I think is worth it. Next up, we have a buff coming over to Lucian as well, which is a little bit surprising since I actually have seen several Lucians pop off in solo queue recently, but the buff is as follows. His culling damage, which is his ultimate, is being increased as you rank up his ultimate, so rank 2 is going to be a 5 extra damage per shot increase, and rank 3 is an extra 10 damage. That's actually quite a bit, because I feel like his ultimate, even at the moment, is doing some pretty respectable damage, but if it's going to be going up rank 2 and rank 3, that's just going to mean he'll actually scale a little bit better than he currently does, which is going to be a big plus for Lucian. Following this, we also have some buffs coming over to Soraka, where her Q damage is being increased by 15 at every single rank. Now, I'm very upset about this because I think Soraka, even though I'm not seeing her often recently, which thank goodness for that, the reason is because maybe she doesn't do enough damage, so they're trying to buff her Q because of that. But when her Q does too much damage, then the champion becomes very obnoxious, because in the laning phase, especially of course as a support, she is not only healing a lot, probably healing more than any other support champion, but her Q harass with her E is surprisingly very powerful, and she ends up doing more damage than most other supports as well. So at that kind of scenario, she has almost too much going on with her kit that makes her a little bit too strong overall, which I think is the biggest issue with the champion. I'm just hoping that this buff to her Q is not going to make that happen once again. And the final change and the final buff for this patch is going to be coming towards Vayne, where her condemn wall damage is being increased from 100% increased damage to now being 150% increased damage. Now this is a buff I actually think is pretty good because yes, it's a lot of extra damage, but I mean, it's her E ability. That's the hardest part of her ability, or her kit rather, to land correctly, right? So if you land it correctly and stuff, then yeah, you get rewarded for the extra damage, which is perfectly fine. And it's going to be doing a fair amount of extra damage, but at least it's not a buff that like her Q or her W or her ultimate, where it's just for the champion's whole kit essentially, you know, just playing the champion a very kind of simple basic way and you're suddenly just stronger, period. Instead now you have to actually use her really properly in order to get the full effectiveness of the new buffs, which I think is a good thing. But either way guys, that is going to be about it for this video. There you have it, all lots of new changes, a lot of nerfs, and especially a lot of buffs coming to this patch so far. Now don't forget, all these changes aren't always going to be going through in the very end, right? Once your patch actually hits the live servers, maybe some of them, maybe none of them, some of the numbers might change by then as well, but this is just an early look. So hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, of course, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, check out my other videos, and I'll see you for next time. Peace.